All right. Well, good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us today. My name is Ayanna Pressley. I'm the Congresswoman representing the Massachusetts 7th Congressional District. It is a great honor to stand here alongside Representatives Clyburn, Scanlon, and Omar, and certainly an honor to stand shoulder to shoulder with such a broad and diverse coalition of movement builders and justice seekers. The mass incarceration crisis is one of our country's greatest failures. It is a policy failure, and it is a moral failure. It's a shameful crisis that has ravaged our communities, destabilized our families, and inflicted generational trauma for far too long. Growing up with an incarcerated parent myself, I can only imagine how different my own childhood would have been if my father was able to get the help that he desperately needed. Instead of compassion and care, the system only offered him criminalization and incarceration for his substance use disorder. And as a child, I was forced to also carry that burden, that stigma, that shame. My story is hardly an anomaly. Across the United States, 50% of adults have had an immediate family member incarcerated. That is a tragedy, and it is a damning commentary on the state of our nation. But there is a solution, and clemency is a part of that solution. President Biden can use clemency as a tool to put thousands of people on a pathway to healing and reunification with their families. He was elected with a mandate to lead with compassion and change lives for the better. And today, he has the power to do so right now. The power to reunite families, addressing long-standing injustices in our legal system, and to help us end mass incarceration. He has the power to cement his legacy as one of the most impactful presidents of our time. And he has the support of millions of people across our country who have felt the harms of mass incarceration. Young children longing to hug their grandparents, people who have taken responsibility for their mistakes, and those who simply were never given a fair chance. Clemency works. Clemency heals. Clemency saves lives. Many of us are standing here today at this podium. We know this to be true. That's why earlier today, my colleagues and I sent a letter to President Biden calling on him to use his executive clemency authority, and we have some ideas on who he should prioritize. The elderly and chronically ill are folks that pose no threat to public safety. People with unjustified sentencing disparities like crack cocaine disparities, and even those who don't benefit from new laws due to lack of retroactive clauses. Those on death row who are at risk of barbaric and inhumane murder at the hands of the Trump administration can have their death sentence commuted and be resentenced to a prison term. And women who were punished for defending themselves against their abusers or were coerced into criminal activity as part of an abusive relationship can benefit from clemency. Broad clemency action works. We know President Biden agrees because of what he has done. The president's previous use of clemency to pardon people convicted of simple marijuana possession and LGBTQ plus former service members has had life-changing impacts. So as we brace ourselves for an incoming administration and anticipate wholesale harm rather than healing, we must do everything in our power to save lives while we still can. President Biden, there are 61 days remaining in your presidency, and the time to act is now. And now we'll hear from Mr. Clyburn.
Thank you very much, Representative Pressley. And thank you very much for including me in this process today. And thank you for the tremendous leadership that you've given to this great cause. I don't think any family exists in these United States that have not in some way been affected by the injustices that sometimes are all too prevalent in our judicial system. And one of those happens to deal with an issue that I don't particularly like to use the term of victimless crimes, but that is a fact, that so many people who are serving extensive sentences today are there because of crimes that have really no victims. And that, to me, is astonishing, and it's something that should be dealt with in a very positive way. We often use the phrase that all elections have consequences, and we tend to use that towards a negative. But the election of Joe Biden was a very positive consequence on this issue. And he's already demonstrated that, as Representative Pressley mentioned earlier, when he used his clemency powers to address the injustices that existed in our drug laws and those penalties. We're here today to ask him to take another step in that direction and to demonstrate once again a very positive consequence of his having been elected our 46th president, and to carry out his clemency powers in a very positive way. All of us are familiar with Martin Luther King Jr.'s admonition, which he really borrowed from a preceding philosopher, that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. This issue is a long-standing issue. It's been around for several decades. It's time for us to really do something to demonstrate that that long arc can, in fact, result in justice. And so I am joining today in asking President Biden, I think he's got about 60 days left in his presidency, to really step up on this issue and add what has already been a very positive impact on this issue, do a little bit more before he leaves office. And with that, I'm pleased to present now, I suspect, Neil. Yeah, I think you're the next one up.
Hey, thank you, sir.
Who's had a little bit of an experience with South Carolina.
Yes, a little bit. North. How y'all doing? You know, I just want you to look to the left and the right and say we all have value. Can you do that? Look at the person left to the right and say, I see you.
I see you.
Thank you. My name is Neil Berry. I'm from New York. I represent an organization called VOCAL, which is Voices of Community Activists and Leaders, and I'm part of the Center for Democracy. I'm sorry, I just get mixed up with these abbreviations. There's so many of them, but my apologies to that. I want to tell you when and how this started. In 1988, I was arrested in Brooklyn, New York, in a well-known black community, and the war on drugs was at its highlight. I was a warehouse. At that time, I was a stockbroker on Wall Street for 13 years. Never had been incarcerated. Had went to college, got a financial job working as a black pioneer on Wall Street. In 1988, when I was incarcerated, I went to trial. And in trial, they found me guilty. Now, there was no way I wasn't even out there. We're not going to go into the trial. But because of that conviction, I lost my wife, who was my wife-to-be. I lost my family, my dignity. I lost my car. This is not a story that's new. Many of us could tell the same story coming out of the war on drugs. So I'm here today because there are many people behind me and in front of me who are facing the same predicament of mass incarceration. There's an economic thing to this too. At that time, probably was high middle class. I lost everything. To say this, that now I probably got most of that back, but the process took 30 years. And in that process, I became an alcoholic. I became homeless. So you see, this is my story. It's one of truth. I would just hope to say today, though, that Biden, we know the history of the war on drugs, and I'll make an analogy to the crime bill. There's an opportunity to leave a legacy of hope and care. I come out of a love and compassion environment. I'm hoping that love and compassion will go forward, especially in this climate. Not vindictive, not forgiving. I'm a very much of a God-fearing black man in America. I'm being real. I'm not idealistic. It's not changing overnight. But I thank you for hearing my story.
Good afternoon. I'm Mary Gay Scanlon, representative for Pennsylvania's 5th District, Philadelphia and suburbs. Thank you for being here, and I want to thank Representative Pressley and Clyburn and our colleagues for their partnership on this issue and for their leadership in advocating for those who are so marginalized, even as we approach the end of this Congress and this administration. Mass incarceration is a stain on the soul of our country. It has disproportionately impacted the most vulnerable Americans, destabilizing families and communities, and inflicting intergenerational trauma. We're talking about 2 million people locked up in jails and prisons across the country, with 1 in 2 adults having had an incarcerated family member, and hundreds of thousands of people who do not pose a significant threat to public safety being subjected to extraordinarily long and punitive sentences. So, whether you're concerned about the cost to our collective humanity or the cost to taxpayers' wallets, it's important that we strive to address this issue in a variety of ways. In the 116th Congress, we were able to pass the First Step Act to address mass incarceration, but that first step has not been followed with sufficient legislative second and third steps. So we're looking to the administration to take another step. Before coming to Congress, I had the privilege to participate in the Clemency Project of 2014, an effort led jointly by the Obama White House, the Department of Justice, and a host of groups across the ideological spectrum, from the Koch brothers to the Criminal Defense Bar to nonprofits. And the purpose was to grant relief to nonviolent offenders who'd been subjected to grossly disproportionate mandatory minimum sentences. In that project, we trained hundreds of private lawyers across the country and joined them in screening tens of thousands of case files and preparing clemency petitions on behalf of deserving individuals who met the rigorous criteria for consideration. Working with the Obama administration and the Department of Justice, we were successful in obtaining relief for almost 2,000 individuals. In representing those clients, we saw how harsh sentences for nonviolent, low-level offenders destroyed lives and families and communities, but we also saw how meaningful and restorative the promise of clemency and a second chance could be for those families and for those communities. So over-reliance on incarceration in our legal system has created a crisis. It's a moral crisis, a legal crisis, a mental health crisis, a financial crisis, and a public trust crisis. And across the country, people from all walks of lives and every end of the political and faith spectrum have recognized this crisis and are demanding change and relief. Because belief in the possibility of rehabilitation and redemption transcends our political and religious affiliations. It's a belief that binds us together as human beings and as Americans. So clemency is an important check and balance on the criminal legal system, one that has existed since our nation's founding as a tool to more fully administer justice. So we are urging that the President expand upon his previous use of clemency power, including pardoning people convicted of simple marijuana possession and those LGBTQ plus former service members. He understands the life-changing impact that the wielding of this power can have, and that's why we're here to support for furthering those efforts. We're asking the President to use the powerful tool at his disposal and take decisive action to address this national issue in the closing days of his administration, as so many of his predecessors have. So justice can't wait. Now is the time to bring awareness to the scarcity of second chances in our criminal legal system. It's the time to forcefully confront mass incarceration. Now is the time to acknowledge the power and promise of rehabilitation and redemption. And now is the time for President Biden to use his constitutional authority to make an important statement about the injustices in our criminal justice system. So I want to thank again my colleagues for their partnership. I look forward to our continued work to push for change to our criminal legal justice system and shift from a system focused on punishment to one that more truly embraces rehabilitation and redemption. And now I'm going to hand it off to Maria Garza of the People's Coalition.
Yeah, thank you.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
In 2017, I couldn't see myself past the gates of Cook County Jail, and today I am standing here next to Representative Pressley and in front of Congress. My name is Maria Garza. Thank you. My name is Maria Garza. I am from Illinois. I am a criminal justice reform advocate, an activist, and a restorative justice practitioner. I am a woman, I'm a Latina, I'm a mother, I'm a daughter of my mother, and I am a daughter of God. Mm-hmm. I am the co-founder of an organization called Challenge to Change in Aurora, Illinois, which provides and offers comprehensive pre-release and post-release support to our community members that are reintegrating back into society after incarceration. I am also here with the People's Coalition for Safety and Freedom, a national coalition of grassroots organizations led by folks directly impacted by the criminal justice system. In my work, I meet people every day, people that I left behind once I was released. This work for me is personal. In 2018, after serving 6 years in pretrial status, I was convicted of calculated criminal drug conspiracy, trafficking, and possession. My mandatory minimum under Illinois truth and sentencing laws was 60 years at 75%. To somebody in my age, and I'm not going to say what that is, my sentence would have outlived me. I would have died in prison. I benefited from a legal team at advocates that came in to advocate for my resentencing. I would have become the first woman in the state of Illinois with the longest length of stay for a drug offense. How does that happen? That started with the '94 crime bill. A crime bill that gave the criminal justice system the power and the authority to implement harsh sentencing laws that would not allow people to come home, that became punitive instead of rehabilitative. But if I didn't have the help of these people, where would I be? I would still be in Illinois state prisons fighting for my freedom. Why I do this work? I do this work for the people that I left behind that do not have the strength, the voice, or the opportunity to fight for their freedom the way I did with mine. Me serving 60 to 20 years could not possibly been rehabilitative. America has the highest number of people incarcerated. It is extremely clear that we are more focused on punishing people unnecessarily than building a more free and just society. These sentences do not only affect the individual, it also affects the people that we leave behind, our children, our communities. When you incarcerate one of our men, you disrupt the home. But when you incarcerate one of our women, you disrupt the home and the communities that we help build, that we forged together. This is the legacy of the '94 crime bill. President Biden, as the primary author and the founding father of the 1994 crime bill, you have the moral obligation to do everything within your power to right the wrong. 30 years wrong, 30 years too long of the '94 crime bill. We have tens of thousands that never got the same chance that I did. On the day of your birthday, President Biden, I ask that you please look at the clemencies that are sitting before you and that you use your executive power to please sign the release of those that have rehabilitated themselves, that do not have the opportunity and the advocacy that I had, and that you bring people home, beginning with Michelle West. Thank you.
Thank you. Woo.
Thank you, Maria, for reminding us who we fight for and why we are here today. Today, we join a growing chorus of voices calling on President Biden to exercise on one of the most profound powers of the presidential office, the power of clemency. Clemency represents a critical opportunity to correct a long-standing injustices, recognize human potential for redemption, and acknowledge that our legal system has often been more punitive than restorative. The United States represents just 5% of the world's population, yet we hold more than 20% of the global prison population. Over 1.9 million individuals are currently incarcerated, with a disproportionate impact on communities of color. Black men are incarcerated at more than 5 times the rate of white men, a legacy of systematic inequalities that have persisted for generations. Recent reforms like the First Step Act have begun to address some of these inequalities, but they are not enough. Clemency offers a direct path to immediate relief for people who have demonstrated rehabilitation, who have developed job skills, pursued education, and shown remarkable personal growth despite challenging circumstances. This moment calls for a moral courage. This calls for recognizing that true justice is not just about punishment, but about giving people meaningful opportunities to contribute to their communities. President Biden has a real opportunity to make a difference. In these final days of his term, we are calling on him to act. Let's give people a second chance. Thank you.
Yeah.
And with that, I invite Jason Ortiz, Last Prison Project.
Yes, thank you. It's always a pleasure. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jason Ortiz, and I'm the Director of Strategic Initiatives for the Last Prisoner Project. We are the nation's most impactful nonprofit organization dedicated to helping those who are incarcerated for cannabis crimes achieve their freedom, get reunited with their families, and become productive members of our community again. We have helped hundreds of amazing people achieve freedom, yet there are still over 3,000 prisoners in federal prison for cannabis crimes. That's 3,000 people that are wasting away in cages for actions that are now legal in 24 states and legal right here in D.C. Sadly, as of today, President Biden has given freedom to more turkeys than he has to people. This is a gross injustice and an injustice that President Biden could correct with a stroke of a pen. A pen just like this could give hundreds of people their freedom and write history. These are real people, people like Edwin Ruiz. Edwin Ruiz was sentenced to 40 years for a nonviolent cannabis charge. 40 years. He's currently served 27 years for that charge, and will be serving another 13 years in federal prison unless President Biden acts. He has missed graduations, first loves, and so much more for his children. All for a mistake that is, again, now legal for multi-state corporations to make millions on a daily basis. People like Ismael Lira. Ismael Lira was sentenced to life in prison for a nonviolent cannabis charge. Life in prison for the same action that is now generating tax revenue for cities and states across the country. People like Jonathan Wall, who was sentenced to 10 years in federal prison for his first offense. And I am here today with his mother, Mitzi Wall, who has been advocating for his release for those entire 7 years. All of these men have served far more time than their crimes warrant. This is why we are here today, to implore the president to do the right thing and choose compassion over criminalizing our communities by commuting the sentences of our constituents and reuniting them with their families for the holidays. This is the last opportunity for these men to achieve freedom, and probably for a very long time. So we are very thankful to our congressional champions and allies for standing with us today, and we call on all members of Congress to join our courageous champions in this most noble of efforts. And lastly, and maybe most importantly, I call on all people of conscience to call the president today and every day to ask him to free our people. They have served far more time than is warranted for their crimes, and together we can right the wrongs of the war on drugs and finally bring an end to this nightmare of a policy. We can do this together. We can stand up and show that the 70% of Americans that support cannabis legalization want this madness to end today. President Biden, you have the power to right this wrong with a stroke of a pen. Do the right thing, choose compassion over incarceration, and leave a legacy as a president that we can all be proud of. Thank you very much. And Reverend Slaughter? Yes.
Thank you, Jason and Representative Pressley, for your steadfast leadership in calling for repair of the harms caused by mass incarceration. To the other members of Congress who have joined us today in prayer, may God grant strength for the battle. I am Pastor Brandy Slaughter, and I joined the abolition movement during the federal killing spree in the first Trump administration. And I'm grateful to stand in partnership with you all today as a board member of Death Penalty Action. Today's event is largely about the many thousands of Americans caught up in a criminal legal system who perhaps should be freed because they have served prison time for relatively minor crimes. Our focus at Death Penalty Action is to stop executions. So I want to be clear that when it comes to our call to President Biden to commute the death sentences of those on the federal and military death rows, we're talking about people who must be held accountable to some very serious crimes. We're not talking about freeing such people. But frankly, it's not even about them. It's about us. It's about us as a people, who we are and who we want to be. If our actions define us, do we want to be killing prisoners when we don't have to? President Biden has been very clear that he opposes the death penalty. He appointed an attorney general who has not set a federal execution date, and there has not been a single federal execution since he took office. But that will change unless President Biden acts now. We know what the next president plans to do if any prisoners are left under a sentence of death at the end of the Biden administration. We've been there. We've done that. I stand with resolve, and on behalf of hundreds of organizations who join with our board chair, Reverend Sharon Risher, whose mother and two cousins were among the Emanuel 9, black Christians murdered by a white supremacist, who is among the 40 men on federal death row. It's not about them. It's about us. President Biden, please grant clemency to every prisoner facing a federal or military death sentence. And don't wait. Do it now. Clemency means mercy. And blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Amen and ashe. Join me in welcoming our next speaker, Danielle Metz. Woo.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you, Congress, for having us today. My name is Danielle Metz. I'm the Director of Clemency for the National Council for Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls. There is no more important time than in this moment that President Biden should use his executive power of clemency to start releasing the women and men that are incarcerated here in the United States. Women deserve a second chance, like me. Mm-hmm. Women who have already served a lifetime. We have sisters and brothers that have been in their 40 and 30 and 50 years. And when you talk about this to other countries, they find this hard to believe. But it's true here in the United States. I know the profound effect of clemency that clemency has. I lived on both sides of that story. At the age of 26, I was sentenced to 3 life sentences plus 20 years. And I served 23 years and 8 months. And President Obama granted me clemency. And since my second chance, I have not squandered. I have not stopped. I have not stopped marching. I have not stopped screaming. I have not stopped politicking. I have not advocated for the sisters and brothers that are still incarcerated. This can be changed, like they say, with just a pen. It can be changed. Excuse me. Wow. Okay. Every day I witness with the work that I do. Every day I witness the hope and dreams of the people that are still here, that are incarcerated. And although they're still they are waiting for their opportunity to contribute to society, if only given a second chance. At the National Council, we advocate for women and men every single day. Since the day I was released from prison, I have not stopped, and I will not stop chanting, free her. Free her.
Free her.
Free her.
Free her.
It is hard to continue and live in a free society knowing that you was on the bunk with somebody for 24 years and to come out here and not advocate for them. They have women every day call me every day just to know that their names are alive. These women are not statistics. Their stories are not forgotten. And that's why we amplify their names and let them know they are loved and they are worthy and they are seen. We know they still exist. So today, being President Biden's birthday, 82nd birthday, I want to wish him a happy birthday, but I wish that you will grant the gift of freedom to those that are still behind, that are still wanting this opportunity. Thank you, and again, I pray that that opportunity is granted to those. Thank you.
Thank you.